Sometimes the most fascinating stories aren't found in big, fancy history books. They're hidden right in front of us, etched into simple pieces of stone. They're the stories of the people who came before us, and today, we're going to uncover one of those really foundational stories.
So, take a look at this. This is the original grave marker for a man named Abraham Doolittle. It's just a common field stone, barely over a foot high, but it's actually the oldest one in Wallingford, Connecticut. So what can a stone like this really tell us about a life lived over 300 years ago? Well, turns out a whole lot, especially when you see what stands there today.
And here's where things get really interesting. In 1918, a descendant, a guy named Stillman Doolittle, paid to have this massive, 7-foot-tall granite monument put up to replace that simple stone. So that's the big question, right? Who was this Abraham Doolittle, and what on earth did he do to inspire such a tribute more than 220 years after he died?
Okay, let's really dig into this. We're going to go on a kind of archaeological dig. Not through dirt, but through old colonial records, family histories, and town minutes to piece together the life of one of America's very first settlers.
So first things first, to understand Abraham Doolittle, we have to understand the world he was leaving behind. See, he wasn't just moving to a new place. He was part of this huge historical movement.
Right, the Puritans. Now, people like Abraham weren't just looking for religious freedom the way we think of it today. No, they were driven by this incredibly intense conviction to build a totally new, purer, godlier society from scratch, something they felt was completely impossible back in England under King Charles I.
And you got to think about who these people actually were. This wasn't some desperate migration of the poor or outcasts. Not at all. These were established, often educated, middle-class citizens who literally left everything behind, not for gold, but for an idea. Abraham shows up in Boston around 1640, just a young man ready to help build this new world. But, just getting to Boston, that was only the first step. The real test was about to begin when they decided to venture out into the American wilderness to carve out a new life.
So, family legend paints this really romantic picture, right? Abraham and his buddies on this 2-week trek through a dangerous, trackless forest, guiding themselves with a compass and singing praises to God. But the reality? Well, historians now think it was probably a lot more practical. Most settlers likely just traveled by boat from Boston to New Haven. It was way safer and more efficient. It's a perfect example of how our family stories can sometimes, add a little extra drama to the facts.
Once he settled down in the New Haven colony, Abraham Doolittle didn't just get by. He absolutely thrived. He very quickly became a completely indispensable part of his new community.
I mean, just look at this list. Before he was even 25 years old, he was made the chief executive officer, basically the sheriff of New Haven. He was a lawmaker, a town founder, a treasurer, and sergeant of the local militia. Back then, public office was seen as a sign of incredible character. So this list, it tells you everything you need to know about how much trust his neighbors put in him.
And here's this amazing little detail we found in the court records. It's a petition from him to the court asking for £5, which they called a moderate sum, for housing and taking care of a Native American man named Topensee for 17 weeks. This is such a rare, humanizing moment that shows a real interaction between a settler and the indigenous population, and it's based on care, not conflict.
Now, this might seem kind of minor, but it's so telling. The community took craftsmanship so seriously that selling shoes made from crummy, unsealed leather was a matter for the court. It just shows you how focused the Puritans were on order, fairness, and quality in every single thing they did. Yeah, no cutting corners in this town.
So, what was life actually like for Abraham and his family back in 17th century Connecticut? Well, it was a world of incredible hardship for sure, but also incredible resilience. Yeah, forget modern construction. A typical house back then was built with an axe and an auger. The logs were untrimmed, the floors were just rough slabs, and everything was held together with wooden pins. And windows? Forget about glass. You got oiled paper, and you were lucky to have it. It was functional, it was sturdy, and it was a constant battle just to keep the weather out.
And the weather wasn't the only threat. During the brutal conflict known as King Philip's War, Abraham served on the town's vigilance committee, and his own house was turned into a fortified garrison. I mean, you were living with the reality that serious danger was literally right outside your door.
But you know what came out of all that shared struggle? These incredibly deep bonds. If someone got sick, neighbors would come tend their farm. When someone died, the entire community, the whole town, would stop. Didn't matter if it was harvest time to mourn together. It really wasn't just a town. It was a brotherhood forged in hardship.
And through all that struggle,
Abraham did very well for himself. When he died, his estate was valued at £342. Now that might not sound like a lot to us, but back then, that was a substantial sum of money. It was a real testament to his hard work and a clear sign of his respected standing in the community he helped build, from absolutely nothing.
So what kind of legacy did this one guy, this steadfast Puritan patriarch, end up leaving behind? Well, as it turns out, his family's story would become completely woven into the fabric of American history itself.
Just look at how this one family's story connects to these huge historical moments. Only 2 years after Abraham dies, his niece's husband gets accused during the Salem witch trials. Less than 100 years after that, his descendant Daniel Doolittle is fighting for independence in the Revolutionary War. The family's story didn't end with Abraham. It just kept echoing through American history.
And that brings us right back to that huge granite monument. When Stillman Doolittle had it built in 1918, it wasn't just a tribute. It was a conscious act of historical preservation. It was him saying, hey, we're part of a long story, and we need to make sure the first chapter is never, ever forgotten.
It's a fair question to ask. I mean, why dig through all these dusty records for some guy who lived centuries ago? Why does the story of Abraham Doolittle and his little fieldstone actually matter to us today?
Because when we look into their lives, we end up revealing something about our own. They're stories of hardship, of faith, of building a community, and of just plain perseverance. That's not just boring genealogy. That's the foundation of the world we live in. Uncovering their lives helps us understand the whole human experience a little better.
The philosopher Edmund Burke really nailed it. People will not look forward to posterity who never look backward to their ancestors. Abraham Doolittle's journey, from a crude fieldstone to a giant granite monument, is this powerful reminder that every ancestor has a story worth uncovering. So it makes you wonder, right? What stories are waiting in your past?